Pfeiffer,
Present.
Commissioner Burnett.
Oh, just say, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Yes, I'm here. It's like, usually my name is not, sorry.
Commissioner Mayfield
Physically,
here.
yes.
Commissioner Ray, Commissioner Richardson.
We have a quorum. Great, thank you. The first thing on our agenda is to review the agenda for the regular meeting, which is in 2 weeks on the 21st of December. That's your second page of your packet. I would ask you to review the minutes so we can get through those quickly on the 21st. And then we have only one, right now, only one public hearing.
And that's all we'll have on the 21st. Can't add any public hearings at this moment.
Do we think we'll have any site plans or anything?
Possibly. Maybe some. But maybe probably one at the most or something.
Okay, I think we've reviewed the agenda for the regular meeting. Let's move on to RZ-21-906. An ordinance to rezone 4.3 acres of land at 229 South Pleasant Valley Road from residential office R01 district with corridor enhancement CE overlay to medium density residential MR district with a corridor enhancement overlay and planned unit development overlay. Mr. Humans.
Thank you. So this should be familiar to you. Planning Commission had recommended approval of the 25-unit townhouse and the one office building back earlier this calendar year. Went through PED committee, and then when it got to council, we realized that the underlying zoning being R01 was not an eligible district for PUD to be overlaid on. So this time around, as you can see in the ordinance that the chairman just read, the change is not only to add the PUD overlay, but to also change the underlying zoning from R01 to MR, medium density residential. Boundaries of the site are exactly the same as they were, and the uses, density and the uses are the same. So the plan is, for the most part, the same as what you saw. Still the 25 townhouse units in the 5 buildings north of the access, which would be right in, right out there on South Pleasant Valley Road. One office building off the south side of that access there. And then the open space to the south that shows in that upper graphic there is the green area, including the stormwater management facility. So the big change really is in terms of the connectivity to the existing residential street there to the west. This is a view looking east from the intersection of Opequon Avenue and East Leicester Street. And you can see the two-way section of East Leicester Street there that abruptly ends in the where the wooded portion of this development site is located. And then the detail that's over there on the side is representing the applicant's proposal to now have just a one-way westbound connector along that curvilinear path that's shown there. So toward the top of that graphic, that is where the private access to the 25 townhouse units comes in on the upper right there, excuse me, upper left, and then you can go out to make the right turn onto Pleasant Valley Road, but you cannot come from the adjoining residential neighborhood there, including Opequon, Shenandoah, Shawnee, and Parkway. People who live in that neighborhood would not be able to exit via East Leicester Street out to Pleasant Valley Road. Even the right only would be precluded. They can, if they are coming south on Pleasant Valley Road, say from the post office, Berryville Avenue corridor, they could enter their subdivisions by making the right in at Leicester Street directly from Pleasant Valley and come in. But going out is not an option. And with this specifically, all streets in the city of Winchester are by default two-way streets unless they are explicitly codified in city code to be a one-way street. And then it's also spelled out as to, is it eastbound, northbound, southbound, westbound. In this case, city council will have to adopt an ordinance And I would say they probably need to do it in conjunction with consideration of the rezoning requests, because this is an element of the development plan. They will have to explicitly adopt an ordinance that converts this easternmost section of existing Leicester Street from two-way to one-way, so that this is facilitated. In terms of the rest of the details, the landscaping buffers. Yes.
This change is going to be advertised or publicized to the people?
It will have to be a public hearing that council will have to advertise in the newspaper.
So really, just, if I could add two actions here. This street change, if I can call it a street change, that's one public hearing, and then the whole rezoning is a second.
Correct. So in December, on the 21st, you'll have your public hearing on the rezoning request. That does include the representation of this section of Leicester being converted. In January, council will have to start an ordinance to city code, an amendment to city code, that will specifically call out this section of existing Leicester to become one-way westbound.
If I can follow. So we don't have to do it, we, the planning commission, don't do anything with the one-way?
No, the conversions of streets from two-way to one-way or vice versa, they don't seek a planning commission recommendation on those. So that would be, I don't know whether they would do a first reading and a second reading in January. There is no PED committee meeting this month, so I think it will probably come to the PED committee in January and then be a first reading, the first meeting in February, and public hearing adoption of it, second meeting in February is my guess. But council will have to make that definitive take that definitive action to convert it. You know, it's a stub, obviously, but you can see based on the way the cars are parked here in the graphic, and because it's not already called out in city code as a one-way street, it would have to be an amendment.
If the city council at large decides that they don't want to do that. Correct.
Yeah.
Do we then have to revisit the rezoning?
So that's a good question. This is the applicant's proposal, they're doing so because they are being responsive to the neighbors' concerns. That would be an interesting scenario if council as a whole said they wanted to keep this two-way. I'll need to consult with the city attorney on that one. I don't know whether.
I'll speak collectively, would be happy to see it again, rather see it just go forward though.
I mean, other PUDs have changed between the time Planning Commission reviewed it and council took action on it. So I would say as long as they're not changing the density of development or green space allocation, stuff like that.
That makes sense.
This is really, since this is already a public right-of-way, it's kind of external to the developer's PUD. It's not within the boundaries of the PUD rezoning area, so I think it would probably just proceed.
But since you've got that picture up, I'm just going to continue kicking this can.
Okay.
If that does get approved one way, those residents that are now parking on that street can't park there, like they are parked on this picture.
That would be correct. Yeah. And I can't remember whether either of the corner lots there, the north side or the south side, have a driveway coming in off of this, but we would definitely be looking at that as well, make sure that we're not inconveniencing them.
Sorry, you get
No,
John, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No.
And wouldn't we see it in the site plan if they changed it from one way to two way, and if it changed anything on there, and we would see it in the site plan then too?
And maybe even as a subdivision, since it's townhouse, it'll have to go through a subdivision public hearing at the Planning Commission. So maybe by the time that comes forward, the decision will be either made or at least known by PED committee or council. How they, I know that it was clear from the first attempt at this that the neighbors and the two city councilors that represent the 3rd Ward were very much opposed to having the two-way traffic, even with just the right in, right out on Pleasant Valley Road. So, but that would be an action that is independent of Planning Commission's action to do the conversion there. So, but it is a necessary step, and I would say should be decided by council before they take a final decision on the rezoning.
Yep.
So that's really the substance of the change from what you had seen earlier this year, is to now have this be a one-way westbound or an inbound connection to the neighborhood. Otherwise, like I said, the screening, the setbacks that would be permissible under PUD overlay are the same. The elevations are the same, and then the floor plans also are the same. Still proposing 3-bedroom townhouses.
Bang.
So that's it in a nutshell. Glad to take any questions. The staff report begins on page 12, and on the last page of the staff report there on 16, you can see there's the 3 draft motions as we typically do for you.
Thank you. Questions for the staff, please?
I don't have any questions, I just have a comment. I like this traffic flow a little bit better than what it was proposed previously. I like the way it was, a right in, right out at Pleasant Valley, and then one way. I think it'll help also cut down some traffic coming through, like the Peck and Shawnee area, and going up to Pleasant Valley. I think that'll help a lot. So I do like this layout a lot better than what it was before.
Similarly, I don't have a question, but I agree with what Brandon said. And then on page 28, there's a section, and I think that that's showing that there'll be a lot of privacy for the existing homes on Opequon Avenue, which is really nice to see as well. I mean, that hasn't changed, but just that they're demonstrating that they're hearing the neighbors' concerns about privacy and things like that. I appreciate.
Yeah, I can't remember if we asked for this section view while it was still at Planning Commission or after it had left Planning
I
Commission.
don't remember, but it's nice to see.
And I do have one additional question. How come we're not, if the rezoning is just covering this parcel of land, why not go 2 parcels up north and convert those 2 parcels so it's not out of place?
To add them to the PUD?
No, to the rezoning.
Well, that would be the PUD, adding the PUD overlay, I guess, right?
But aren't we converting it to, because it's RO1 now, right?
It is, yeah. Yeah.
And then
I think I understand the question. So it is viable RO1 zoning, even though, yes, it's become a very small zone. We have the RO1 across the street there with Jones Funeral Home. And I don't think we want to force a property that does allow for an office building on it and residential to now become a property that can only be a single-family residential. So I would love to think that the owner of that property would say, hey, me too, and let's propose a few more townhouses off of it, but that owner was not interested. They were approached about that.
Bob, I'm confused. Can you point out the properties you're talking about?
Yeah, so they're the ones down here, just north of the yellow line. There's 2 parcels with 1 house and a driveway coming in, and then an alley that is along the rear of the properties that front on Cork Street there. Those 2 parcels, as is the subject site, that's currently the R1 zoning.
But does the owner of the large property own that vacant lot?
No.
Okay.
No. No, the two lots that are there are owned in common. The house, I think, actually straddles the line between them, so that would have to be pretty much developed as if somebody wanted to convert it, they would assemble those 2 lots together. It would be desirable, but attempts to try to encourage that property owner to be part of this PUD didn't succeed.
Well, I wasn't talking about being part of it. I was just talking about just rezoning those 2 parcels to MR. But I understand you taking away the flexibility of making it an office as well,
Yeah.
office space. But I was saying as far as not joining it up.
Hmm? Oh, do we now have that? Okay, I knew we were talking about consolidating that. So we have a minor subdivision filed now that
Gotcha.
will
Okay.
consolidate.
For those two lots?
Just for those two lots, yes.
That makes sense.
Cool.
I have a
Well,
quick-
oh,
I have a question.
Go ahead, John.
More of a concern. The townhouses, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, was it 7? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 7 row townhouses.
Yes.
The one closest to Pleasant Valley,
Mhm.
it seems awfully close to high-speeding traffic.
We made that comment in the staff report. We encouraged the applicant to do a dense buffer there, you know, with evergreen screening and/or a screening fence. On the side elevations there, it would be, I believe the one on the upper right there would be the elevation facing out toward the street, but you can see the brown fence that they're proposing for the screening the backyard, so if the kids, if they have kids, they won't be running out into Pleasant Valley Road. But yes, I agree, we made that comment. For the northernmost building, that had been one large building as well, and they split that into a 4-unit and a 3-unit, and were able to shift that further away. But the second building down, that's where you have the 24-foot wide access drive, or 20-foot, whatever it is there, and there's really no room to shift that. So the only way you could get buildings further away is if you took 1 unit away.
But if I remember correctly, if I could tag on, John, when we talked about this before, there's a good 20 or 30 feet between the road and that closest most townhouse. Is that? I'll look to Ron. Is that?
It's,
15 according to this. Building to Pleasant Valley Road, 15 foot. But then you have the sidewalk and a grass strip inside the right of way, so where the closest travel lane is, it's more than 20 feet.
Okay. And I think we've had this discussion before. Still this close. You had a question, Paul?
Yes, so I think the rezoning makes sense like last time. I think maybe in between last time and this time we've had that housing report, and I was just wondering how these units may have fit into that. I think the reference to is 270,000, though I'm sure that's not in stone. How does this fit in the housing plan?
We'll let Sean answer that.
could you clarify the question?
Again, I think this makes sense either way, but I was just wondering, are these sorts of homes something that in the housing plan it seemed like we have a need for, or?
So, not necessarily, not a housing plan, housing study.
Study, sorry.
Just a little difference. So I would say the results of the housing study suggest that pretty much all types of housing are types of housing that we have a market for and a need for. So for sale townhomes, certainly those are very attractive and would probably be very attractive on the site.
I think one of your points in the housing study is that people are buying down, and so this might address that a little bit.
If I recall the price points on these units, Tim, what were the price
I
points?
think 270 is what they had
That
mentioned
was the-
previously.
That's pretty much in that middle area that
Mhm.
it's not going to help. It's not going to satisfy the gap on the top end. Certainly not going to satisfy the gap on the bottom end, but it's still, key middle range units that we're always going to need those.
But we're still short dozens, if not hundreds of units. Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair.
Okay.
I mean,
In terms of building.
it's I'll say sure, but it's a much more nuanced answer that I don't think you want me to take the time to go down that road, but I'll say sure.
So there's a valid requirement for these. We need these houses in Winchester.
It's certainly what the market is saying is
Okay.
attractive. Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry to jump in.
No, that's exactly it. There's the argument essentially if someone was opposed to this isn't that there's an alternative that's better, there's a market for this.
Yeah. Questions?
I think I'm good.
Any other discussion about this? We're going to see it in 2 weeks. Well, then I'll share. I think this is, again, it's a good use of this land. I mean, it's a strange shaped parcel, and you either do something innovative like this on this parcel, or you leave it blank or empty. And these are some of the best townhome designs I've seen. So, thanks for bringing this back. Cool. Any other questions or comments on this? Okay. I think that's the end of our agenda.
As far as your public hearing for the regular meeting in 2 weeks, yes.
Any committee reports?
I don't know of any.
Did anyone go to the county meeting? Who was? See, I didn't want to point fingers, but you raised your hand.
I did.
Anything out of the county?
Well, there's one with the Southern States expanding their operation right there next to the drive-in movie theater on Route 11, just south of Stevens City. They're gonna, I can't remember what it was, include there's some warehouse storage space, some agricultural, I guess, use to it. And then there was the last meeting last week was about a solar farm out Hollow Road, where there was the old orchard. It's like 300 some acres, 106 acres or so was going to be part of the solar farm. The other was just going to be the open land. They had an old barn on the site, so they were keeping that, and they're staying away like 250 feet away from that as a buffer. They're going to do an archaeological study to make sure nothing, will, if it comes out of the ground or if it wasn't a historic site or something like that as far as a battle. And a lot of neighbors were opposed to the solar farm because there are a couple of subdivisions around and houses that could potentially see the solar panels. But it was a pretty interesting meeting on that. And I think that was it pretty much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't have the roster in front of me. Who's got the county this month? Do I? I don't have. Do you still have this month?
I signed up for 4, I think.
I think, yeah.
You're welcome, guys. Enjoy your holidays.
But I'm not sure that they'll have another meeting.
I don't think
this year.
they're going to have another one this week.
Yeah, December's always.
Why you got to be calling me out?
But it's not going to be slow here. Status of projects pending council approval or PED approval.
So at the November 23rd council meeting 2 weeks ago, they did have a public hearing and adopted the rezoning for the Leg Boulevard. That was 246 apartment units there near Apple Blossom Mall and Home Depot, etc. So that was approved. I don't even think there were any public comments on that.
I was just going to ask.
Unlike the other rezoning, which was the preserve at Meadow Branch there, involving the extension of Jefferson Street and Nestor, we had, I think, 17 speakers at the public hearing on that, 2 of whom were the representing the applicant. But a lot of concerns expressed, including stormwater management, traffic impacts on wildlife, safety, and compatibility of the development. And so City Council deliberated it for a while. There was a motion to approve it. That died because of a lack of a second. And then there was a motion to table, which was actually a motion to continue the item. So it is continued until the December 14th meeting. I have received some additional materials from the applicant, including HOA documents that City Council specifically asked for in their motion to continue. And then also the applicant just today gave me a representation of how they could get 70 lots with a by right conventional development, 12,000 square foot lots, 75-foot minimum widths. And so I'll be putting that into the packet here for next Tuesday's council meeting.
And what were they asking for? A smaller number?
74 age-restricted units on lots that would be no smaller than 9,400 square feet and no narrower than 65 feet.
And so
So-
70 is a compromise?
So if they reduce the number and don't ask for any exceptions, they can just do that by right?
Correct.
Yes.
Ah,
Then the city, then does the action go away and they just do a site plan?
Well, the rezoning would no longer be necessary
Yeah.
if they were to choose to do conventional development. And understand, the request that's before council is for the clustered PUD type of development. So we don't know for certain whether the developer would instead choose to do a conventional development there. But if they did, they would not need to go through a rezoning public hearing process. And they would still need to do a subdivision, which would require a public hearing at Planning Commission, but would not require a public hearing at City Council.
But city council approves the subdivision.
City Council still has to make a motion to approve the subdivision, but as a ministerial act, if a conventional development meets all of the subdivision standards and zoning ordinance standards, state code is pretty strict about what they call ministerial acts. Like if you, the developer, meet those standards, even if you don't like the development, the owner has a right to develop by right. And it is, there's been confusion about whether that part of the site and even some of the other portions of the Glasgow and Bernie property are zoned LR versus like EIP, the Education Institution in Public. Glasgow and Bernie property does include a number of acres up closer to the front along Amherst Street, where the museum buildings and the historic house and other structures are located. But the bulk of the property, including the 20 acres that's proposed for the PUD overlay, that existing zoning is LR, low density residential. So those are the two that I handled, and then Alfredo had a couple of items on the agenda as well.
The humanitarian shelters text amendment was forwarded to the PED committee. PED committee cited some concerns, and there was some language that they wanted added back to the text, specifically relating to the 200-foot provision, proximity from residential districts. They wanted to see how that may conflict with the RB1 and B1 districts, given that the residential nature. Also, they changed the review of 5 years for these permits to every 2 years. So we're going to make these changes, and staff is going to consult with the city attorney on the nature of these changes and whether the nature of the changes is significant enough or requires a public hearing. Most likely not. So that'll be going to PED not in December, right? But January. We don't have a PED meeting this month, so January. And then on the November 23rd regular meeting, short-term rentals was finally approved, the text amendment. So that's been adopted. That's in effect now. So
As we send it up.
as sent, no questions, approved as is. So
No.
We went through various changes along the way. This would be, I think there was one final thing that we gave them a few different options. They said no to one, but sorry. But there was one, what was the
it's
change?
not permitted in multifamily dwellings.
We added home shares back in.
Home shares are permitted by right in all residential districts. So short-term rentals are not permitted in any of the residential districts. It's essentially a compromise.
Yeah, but we tightened the home share definition so that it has to be owner occupied. The owner has to be there and it has to be actually present when it's being rented. Right. So you won't have a situation. You guys spend a lot of time talking about, well, are they there 160 days a year? What is residency? We just said nope. You got to be there while it's rented out.
Right.
And a home share is,
you own the property and say during the week or weekend you want to rent out 2 rooms maximum. You're within your right to do so as long as, one, you own the property, you're there at the time that you're renting out, and no more than 2 rooms.
and home share is 0 to 30 or longer.
No, if it's more than 30 days, it's not considered
short-term rentals.
Short-term rental without being short.
Yeah, it wouldn't be covered in this. That would just
That
be
would a regular rent.
Yeah.
Right.
For a home share, does it require a business license?
Yes, so it requires a zoning use
You go to
permit,
Airbnb.
short-term rental, and a business.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So it'd still be branded Airbnb.
Yeah.
It's just that you're
They
there.
could advertise on that site if they
Right.
wanted to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or Verbo, any of the other
Yeah.
places.
Yeah, but it prevents that situation, another scenario you guys discussed where somebody might own several properties and just
Can't live in one.
can't live in more than one, or they,
Right.
so it kind of, it satisfied what a couple of counselors wanted, which was the, I'm aging in place, I need some extra money, I'd like to rent out a room occasionally. We wanted to provide folks that avenue for economic opportunity, so.
And that sounds reasonable, and, kudos to the city for finally getting the STR ordinance in place, because I think we needed it. We're watching cities around the country deal with it. I think we've got a good model now.
And then at that same meeting, the CUP for Valor Drive for the assisted living facility was approved. Second, third floors of those buildings, a total of 16 units. That was approved by council, and they added the amendment that they can continue to use those apartments as rental units if they wish to do so. No changes to that one. And then finally, we had discussed this last time, I believe. Staff is working with the PED committee on an underground utility waiver text amendment discussion, and that'll go back in January. And that's to provision 18-22 of the zoning ordinance related to the requirement of underground utilities installation. It's just a discussion. There's no formal resolution in place, so it's just going back for their consideration.
And would that be citywide? Is that what the discussion is?
Citywide.
So what does that mean?
So the way it is now, and again, this is just in discussion, if you are increasing service capacity to electrical, you'd be required to install your distribution lines underground. And staff is discussing additional criteria where administrative waivers may be granted in specific scenarios. So
And this is residential, commercial, industrial.
it does not apply to commercial. The waivers are only for residential properties. So
But this
for-
this would be a requirement for everybody in the city.
it is now.
But you can
already.
get a waiver if you need it for residential.
In very
possibly.
specific circumstances, yes.
Right, okay.
Very specific.
How about
And it's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, that's you.
I was gonna ask, and is that an administrative waiver, or are you thinking it would have to come through us?
It's an administrative waiver, and so this is simply a discussion for council. Is there any desire in granting additional waiver criteria for granting those waivers?
Is there any pressure to do that? I mean, is there any?
There are certain applications that have been in place that have maybe brought up that question, but this isn't for any one specific scenario.
Well, thanks, I'm glad they're keeping you busy.
Yeah, for sure.
And for mixed use, is that considered commercial then?
The more restricted would be commercial, right? The commercial aspect of it, and so it would be a greater service requirement, so it'd be required to go underground.
It's really just single-family detached residential. And those waivers, the way they're set up, the criteria for evaluating is spelled out in the zoning ordinance, so it's not like it's a lot of discretion on behalf of the zoning administrator. He or she just has to basically say, oh, okay, you do meet one of these eligible criteria for being granted a waiver.
Great. Was that it?
Yes, sir.
The only other thing I got about the PED discussion about the comprehensive plan, city PED committee did start a more detailed review of the plan this last time around, and related to the Pleasant Valley Road area, they did, the 3 members of council who serve on PED did specifically request that the roundabout representation there at East Leicester Street, across from Jones, a little south of Jones Funeral Home, that be taken out. And obviously, what you saw today, the applicant is not depicting anything like that. And then they did decide, however, they want to have perhaps another 2 months of review, and and they will not be meeting in December, so that pretty much means January and February, that PED would be looking at the comp plan. There is a 150-day maximum time between the commission forwarding it to council and them having action on it. So they're anticipating that perhaps March, maybe as late as April, that they would take action on the plan. This is very different than the last time around.
But it's been a long process. COVID didn't help us at all. I will share with the rest of the commission, and Mr. Humans already knows this, he asked me to draft a cover letter for the comp plan. And could I ask you to share that with the draft with all the commissioners?
Sure, we can bring that, I can email that out to you.
And if you've got any comments, then I'll come back to us and it's just a draft. It's supposed to be the cover letter that's signed by the chairman and the mayor.
I was just gonna say if we could critique it, but you answered my question.
Feel free to recommend any tweaks.
I'll get my red pen out.
We left out all these army documents.
No Frederick County thanks Tim. No Frederick County Planning Commission liaison. Any general discussion for the good of the order?
Just mention to you that we pretty much have the calendar for the commission meetings and work sessions and head meetings and council meetings worked up. Coincidentally, Amy Simmons is putting together the citywide, the true calendar with all the pictures on it and everything. And so we are double checking for consistency between those two. One thing that I was particularly focused on was making sure that the November work session didn't conflict with Election Day. As it turns out, next year, Election Day is not on the first Tuesday. It's on the 8th of November instead of the 1st. So your work session is, yeah, I had to Google that myself to confirm that really was the case.
Cool.
So Election Day does not conflict with the Planning Commission's work session, and instead would be the same day as the City Council meeting on the second Tuesday.
Yeah, I think it's the first Tuesday if it's not the first day.
Okay, I didn't
Some
know about that criteria.
strange rule.
And the other thing is, well, two things. One, the PED committee, I believe the decision is final that they will not have a PED meeting in July or December.
That is correct for December. Let me double check July real quick, but I believe you are right.
So, and of course, PED will not be meeting this month. So that was part of the reason why the Planning Commission sponsored amendment for the B1 zone, heading up North Cameron Street to include the Zero Pack property. We realized it wasn't going to get to City Council any sooner than the February because they weren't having a PED meeting to review it this month. So rather than rush that, we want to give opportunity to have some awareness, maybe a public meeting or some kind of a mailing directly to the affected property owners, very much like what we had done with the corridor overlay districts, so that we don't catch them off guard saying, hey, by the way, we're rezoning your property in the public hearings in 2 weeks.
Correct. No PED December or July of next year.
And the last thing I want to mention in terms of schedule is we're working up the sign-up sheet for you to see at the regular meeting to sign up for Frederick County liaison duty.
Can we look at that at our next work session? So the January work session, is that, I can't remember.
Yeah, we'll just need to have somebody ready to go the very next day, I guess, if
okay.
Frederick County has a meeting.
I know.
You already signed up. Then that's fine, yeah.
Where's your
Or
key?
again, I can.
Well, if you've got it ready in 2 weeks, we'll just start
You
playing.
can
with
sign
it.
me up for it, that's fine, I really don't care. I'll
Brandon,
take
I
it.
can take it. You want to sign me up for it?
No, we'll fight for it outside.
Arm wrestle.
Someone will be there.
I was gonna ask, just to finish the process, if the PED's not gonna meet for 2 months out of the year, should the Planning Commission miss any months?
No.
I just throw that out for discussion.
You know, I think we did skip one meeting this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, we just didn't have quorum.
Well,
No.
yeah,
Wait, was there no agenda items?
I thought there was 1 month where we didn't have public hearings, maybe not.
Not that I
Well, there was one month we had 3 meetings. We had a
Right.
special meeting for the
Yeah.
park.
If we don't have items, we won't meet, but for the calendar, we do have them listed. But it does mean without head meeting in a month, we could have, you know, for instance, if we have planning commission public hearing in July, it won't proceed to PED committee until the end of August, and then it wouldn't get to city council for action until September. So, you know, there will be those 2 times a year when there's a delay.
Well, yeah, I threw that for discussion, but I think that, you know, as part of the process, we've got a good rhythm every month, and we'll just knock out whatever is there, and we'll just put it in their inbox, if I could frame it that way. I will tell you that the middle school is all gone. They
Wow.
seeded the whole area.
Oh, they did that for their kind of.
It's gone, yeah. The
When you're
Lincoln
talking
Drive.
about Danny Morgan, it's like, what?
Oh, not our middle school. And they have broken ground on Meadow Ranch too, so that's exciting.
Do we know when we're breaking ground on the old hospital?
No, we don't know that, but we do know that they filed a building permit. I'm not sure if it's approved for the local, but it's close to being approved if it isn't
For
already.
the local?
So
Spring
they're
Street.
North of Dick's Sporting Good. We should see dirt being pushed around pretty soon.
That's 3 big projects.
That's a huge project.
We've been waiting.
Yeah.
We've been waiting. Any announcements?
I don't know if you know, but we have a new ice cream place opening up in front of Lowe's. You know that?
The move through.
New what?
The move through.
The move through,
Something, yeah.
ice cream and.
That's
there you go.
exciting.
City's already been there, in and out.
And
Like,
another announcement, if you guys like Violini's, that's all Northern Italian. If you like Sicilian food, 1 block west, new restaurant called Atica.
It's good.
Oh, is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in Indiana. Excellent Italian, excellent Sicilian food.
Oh, it's interesting.
Anything from the city manager? Since you're here, I'll ask if you've got anything for us in general.
No, about good Italian restaurants.
Well, he would be the one to know.
I do actually, one thing just came to mind. So last time we talked about changes to boards and commissions. Council had assigned Councilor McKernan to work on that with me. So we're putting off that until January. So we're just pressing the pause button until they assign somebody else.
Well, I appreciate you raising that. It does have the impact is that 2 members will be in limbo.
Well, no, I think we're going to go ahead and reappoint. Or, well, you'll go through the process, I should say.
Okay, if you want to.
Yeah. It's open. You put in their applications. So we're going to.
Well, that's exciting.
That's good.
That's very exciting. Thank you. Yes? I'm sorry. Oh, I thought you said you had something.
No, I said no. Motion to adjourn.
Move. Second.
Second.
We're adjourned. We don't do motions in working session.
Adjourned.